There's something that you're not saying.
Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, we say this almost every time we have a guest on, so maybe this diminishes what we're about to say. But we have one of the greats with us again. Or maybe it's just we're lucky.
You call everybody a great. Come on, man. Come on.
Well,
Evan's not that stupid. He knows that you're just putting him on. Come on.
Well, I mean, that everybody that comes in here is really, really good, right? And maybe it's just because I'm always amazed somebody wants to spend a little time with us.
We have a very talented staff, Shawn. I mean, that's just the fact. But there's no question that Evan Petzold has the best hair in sports media. And unfortunately, nobody can see this, but he's wearing a hat right now. He's keeping us from watching that beautiful mane. I mean, it's resplendent.
Well, I didn't have enough time to polish it up. I had to, I slicked it back, threw on a hat. You know, it takes a little bit of work.
Well, it certainly balances out what I don't have. So I guess that's a good thing if we're looking at the ledger of the overall freak standings in the hair department.
We have hair power rankings at the Free Press.
Well, I don't know. I mean, apparently you've got good hair too, so you can talk about hair all you want. Yeah. I used to have hair. It was more of a Rick Ocasek kind of a look. It's probably predating Evan.
You gotta one of these days you got to show us actual photographic proof of when you had hair, because other than when you were like 5 years old, I've seen pictures.
No, I didn't really start losing it until my early 30s probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We need proof next time.
Yeah.
Sorry, Evan. I'm sorry. We've taken up all our time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. And by the way, Evan, I just want you to know, if Carlos suddenly implodes or disappears from the screen, it's because today he's going to write his third column in 3 days. And that's probably a new thing for him. And I don't know what that's going to do to the universe.
It's a lot
and the
of work.
equilibrium. So if he just up and disappears, I think that's probably going to explain it.
I love you guys going at it. This is too good.
Oh man,
Evan's written 3 stories before you even came on the chat with us.
Yeah, no kidding. He's the Dave Burkett of the Tiger Beat, or should we say Dave is the Evan of the Lions Beat?
Oh, I don't think we can say that.
No,
I don't think we can say that.
That's a little bit too far.
Out of respect for Dave, no way.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen. Thanks for joining us, Evan. On the what's the name of the show? The Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. It's just Carlos. The Carlos
almost
Menard
renamed
show.
it. We weren't sure about your participation, so we also almost renamed it Free Press Sports with Evan and Carlos. So,
I think that's great. We're glad to have Evan in. We're going to get to the Lions a little bit later because I think they won a game, and Carlos is very excited about that. But before we get to that, let's get into the new Tigers president of baseball operations, Scott Harris. He talked to 1,000 media people the other day at Comerica Park. And Evan was front and center and had about 10 questions. So tell us what you think, Evan.
No, I mean, I was interested, just like kind of the rest of us were. I think, probably my biggest takeaway from it was just the overall feel. Like, I think we can pick through what he said and maybe more importantly, what he didn't say. But I do think that like just the overall vibe of the press conference was pretty good. It was a lot different than like an Al Avila type press conference. Like, this was a guy who came up there with like a plan and he executed it. And I think that's kind of resembles what he wants to do with the baseball team. Like, you could tell the way that he walked in, confident, poised. He kind of had he had a really good presence about him. Didn't say, too little, didn't say too much. He seemed like he just had a really good feel for the situation and came in and kind of spoke what he felt like he needed to speak. He tried to connect with the fans. Talking about it being Detroit's team, not his team or the front office's team or the players' team, but it's Detroit's team. Tried to connect that way with the fans. I thought that was a pretty good effort. But look, like, obviously he understands a lot more than he let on. Like, I think he did a good job of balancing kind of things that he wants to keep close to the chest and things that he wanted to say. And finding that balance is pretty important. I think that was something that, at certain points during his tenure, I think Al Avila struggled to do that. So I think you saw a little bit of that there. But yeah, very calculated guy. I thought Chris Ilitch did pretty well too, the owner. When he had the Al Avila exit press conference, that was a complete mess, in my opinion. In a lot of people's opinion, I thought he did a pretty good job at the press conference for Scott Harris. And it was interesting. There's a lot to talk about. What did you guys think? That's the real question. You guys are both there.
Yeah, well, that's kind of you, Evan, but we've only been doing this a year, Carlos, and we kind of know the rhythm of this. So come on, man.
I thought you were sleeping, but okay. Yeah, I mean, you know what? He was very polished, he's 35 years old, which is, I have socks older than that, but he does not come off as a 35-year-old. That's the thing, right? Everybody wants their wunderkind, their young Theo Epstein and all that. And he sounds like a guy who's going to use a lot of data, a lot of analytics. And I know the Tigers were moving toward that. I mean, Avila talked about that. We've increased our focus on data and technology and how to analyze things. I don't know how much of that he really internalized and really believed in and put into practice. But I think this guy, Harris, is really going to do that. I mean, I think he's one of these, I don't know, there's probably like a major somewhere in college, at the Ivy Leagues of like baseball, president of operations for a baseball major or something. They're all popping them out.
Yeah,
they should have it. Yeah. Yeah. It's all these, who was the first guy? DePodesta, right? These kind of guys. And so it's a smart guy, and really, I don't know how much he was in front of the cameras as the second in command with the Giants, but he really seems media savvy. He knows he came off as that's something Al always had he was a little less comfortable in front of the cameras. There was always like this kind of nervousness about him a little bit. Yeah. One-on-one off camera, he was great, very relaxed, but the cameras came on. I think he was I don't know what it was, a little worried, nervous, whatever. This guy seems like, oh man, I was born for this. Like he was like, boom, I am ready. Center stage. I know what to say. I know what not to say. I know how to dodge questions. I know how to give you a little bit. I have my 3 talking points of the 3 things that are important to me. Like he could have done a PowerPoint. I mean, it was that polished. But it's gonna be interesting to see. And my big takeaway from it, as a Dodger fan, and I've watched the Dodgers for a long time, and I'm trying to quit them, but I can't. But watching them a lot is these guys have insane plate discipline at the plate, the hitters. I mean, they just do not chase back. I don't know how they do it, top to bottom, all their guys. And that's what he's talking about, the strike zone. He's talking about both sides, pitching and hitting. But the thing with the Dodgers, to me, they've always have great pitching. They just, as an organization, the Giants have too. But you watch the Giants and you watch the Dodgers, and their chase rate is so low. They just have so much discipline. And if you watch that kind of thing, if they can apply that to the Tigers, if nothing else, forget all about this. We want to have our young guys and grow them in the system. Of course, everybody wants to do that, But if you can apply that, use data to apply better plate discipline, getting the players to be better on a at bat, per at bat basis, you will see significant improvement in this team. So I hope he brings that to the Tigers.
Let me just ask you this, Evan. Oh, do you want to answer?
It's not your turn, Evan. Shawn.
I don't really think there was a question in there, so I wanted to provide one. But go ahead, Evan.
What do you think, Shawn?
No, yeah, I mean, I guess, but also, I mean, no. Look, I think that what you said about the chase rate is huge. I mean, the Tigers have the worst chase rate in baseball. And obviously a lot of that is driven by Javier Baez, but it's also kind of throughout the farm system, though, right? Because that's kind of the other point that he talked to was player acquisition and. Okay, let's scout and try to find players that we want that kind of fit this mold of the strike zone, right? Let's draft the players that kind of fit this mold. Let's acquire them. Let's sign them internationally. Let's make trades for them. Like, let's target this, these types of players, for example, and then really allow everything to build from that. So that was kind of my follow-up to that. But
the one thing that's going to be very interesting, and he did say this winter we're going to be active and we're going to make calculated risks. We're not going to be risk averse. Something the Giants did. I read this in a story in the Athletic, I think it was, and it was something like the Giants have made 20 trades this year since March, and that's not just him, obviously, with the Giants, but that he comes from that kind of aggressive mindset. And he said we're kind of going to be a little bit aggressive in finding the people in this roster, and maybe getting. Who knows? Maybe getting rid of some people. So that should be fun, at least, right? There's not fun for you, Evan, in the offseason, but it's going to be fun to watch how it unfolds, how aggressive they are.
Definitely. I think definitely there will be people on the way out. With the roster, and I think that kind of extends to all throughout the organization, whether it's the front office, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's the training staff, and down to the players. Like there will be a lot of moves made, and there will be a lot of changes, and some of them, we're going to be able to see, right up and close because there's going to be, trades or, free agent, additions, but others are going to be more kind of in the background, moves that are made to try to build a good organization, an organization that can win.
Shawn.
Evan, I'm curious. I'm going to try to remain calm here. All right. So I don't want to sound, and this is terrible to start off anything with. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to sound. But first of all, just for our listeners out there that are over 30 or especially 40 and God forbid 50, right? When we say chase rate, we can say, oh, yeah, the person's got a good eye because it's the same thing. And as far as I know, the evolution of hand-eye coordination has not changed other than the fact that there are more people on the planet. So you're probably going to find more people with better hand-eye coordination as a matter of mathematics. That's the kind of mathematics that I'm interested in, by the way. And Evan, I'm curious. Let me just throw this out there. Would Scott Harris have taken Spencer Torkelson? Because I bet he would have taken Riley Green. But would he have taken Torkelson?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think at that point, Torkelson was considered a, consensus 1-1. I think he was kind of the guy in that draft that I think anybody that had number 1 overall pick probably would have taken him.
Because I ask you that just because I'm curious, because we heard at the press conference with Scott Harris a lot about, obviously a lot about development, but also just sort of finding guys, right? And he didn't say we want different kind of players, but he sort of implied that to a degree. And I'm curious what you think that means and what kind of players are they going to go get other than guys that can just, square the ball up. How about that?
I think that's what they need is guys that can move the ball forward.
Yep.
When you're swinging it pitches outside the strike zone and when you're striking out way too much and you're not moving the ball forward in situations where you need to be. That was the biggest problem, right? Like they haven't scored runs for the most part of this entire season. Like the offense has been abysmal. And I think that comes down to having enough players in the organization that can literally just move the ball forward at a more consistent rate. Like I think that is the key from an offensive standpoint in terms of what they need to figure out. And on the pitching side, like I think there's a lot of good pieces in there. And I think that, guys like Chris Fetter and Gabe Rebus and, Ryan Garko in the player development department. I think they've done a really good job of developing some young pitchers. We've seen like Bo Brisky and Garrett Hill and a number of young pitchers. Joey Wentz has looked really good recently after he went down and, worked on being more in the strike zone. That was the focus. And he's been really good his last 2 times out. So I think there's some momentum on the pitching side, but I think like from the hitting side, it sounds super simple. And I know it's not that simple, but they do need guys that can move the ball forward and that aren't striking out as much. And they're able to put the ball in play, move runners up, hit to the gaps. Power's a big thing. There's been absolutely no power on this team. I think Javier Baez leads you with 14 home runs. Like that's not enough. So I think it's trying to find the right blend of guys that can move the ball forward and aren't going to be these strikeout machines, but can also hit for some power and drive in some runs. And look, that's tough to find, right? Like that's a rare breed, but that's why it's difficult. And that's why it's important to be able to single those players out and then also develop that out of them too, like get the most out of those players.
I think that, one thing he said about, finding different players and finding guys, I think he mentioned finding guys who do things a little bit differently to give Hinch more options in his lineup. And I think it's not, chase rate's important, but also power is, like you guys are saying, power is important, or hitting the other way or whatever it might be, like some guys are going to strike out. The power guys are probably going to strike out more, that's just reasonable, but having that, and I think, as a Dodger fan, they've been so good for so long now, recently. And you see that, like, I don't know, whoever it might be. I don't know the numbers, like, off the top of my head, but like Bellinger is a guy who I think he chases a lot. He's looking for power. He has a really hard swing all the time. His chase rate's probably not great, but you have to have that too. You have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit and like, hey, this is a team, we need power here, or going against, righty lefty matchups or whatever, finding the kind of, blend in your roster that can go against, hey, we're going against this team that does certain things well. We got to counter it with this team. And that goes for both sides, right? Pitching and hitting. So I think that's where like the stats should be important. And we need these kind of players. We need to develop them. We need to find them in free agency, whatever it is. But this is how, and you look at the Dodgers and, someone like Chris Taylor came out of nowhere. I think he was at Seattle, just some mediocre guy who, and he's become like a semi-star for them. He's really a valuable player for them. They find people like that. And through all the analytics, through all the study, through all the tape, through all the whatever, the regressions they're running, and, they can tell these guys using data points, using science, like, this is what you need to do. And I think this is part, I don't know how much this is true, right? But when they sent Grossman to Tampa, or not Tampa, Atlanta, I mean, he kind of hinted at that. I wonder if they right away threw some stats at him and some data and like, hey, listen, this is where your chase rate is. This is where your zone is. This is whatever. And like, wow, I never got that in Detroit. Like this, he didn't give away the whole store, but he may have been hinting at that.
No, yeah, I think that's kind of the whole point of it. Like, you can go look at Robbie Grossman, and he started off, really, really good in Atlanta, and then he hit a pretty big slump, and he's had a couple good games and some bad games. But I think it's like more just like the overall process of that, right? It's like, okay, like, why were they able to provide me with that when the Tigers weren't able to do that? Like, regardless of if it worked, but it is just hey, they had that for me.
And then why did he slump after that? And which is another existential question. Can we?
Right.
By the way, Evan, do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Do you mind if we take a quick break and come back with you, talk a little bit more Tigers, and then we'll eventually get to the Lions, I promise, Carlos. Would that be all right, Carlos?
Okay, fine.
Okay,
Let's
fine.
do it.
All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.
Hello, I'm Phil Friend, the host and producer of Spartan Speak, a podcast collaboration between the Detroit Free Press and Lansing State Journal focusing on Michigan State sports. Each week, I'm joined by the OGs of the MSU podcasting game, Freak beat writer Chris Laurie and LSJ sports columnist Graham Couch, as we discuss and dissect the latest sports news coming out of East Lansing. Not only is Spartan Speak one of, if not the longest-running MSU sports podcast out there, you won't find a show with two people as clued into the Spartans as Chris and Graham, each of whom have spent a decade-plus covering MSU and bring years of institutional knowledge and insight to the podcast. And once in a while, they'll let me throw out a take as well. Along with discussing the latest news, we'll break down the Spartans' last game on the hardwood and the gridiron. What went right? What went wrong? Jet sweep. Again? For both Mel Tucker and Tom Izzo, get you ready for the next game, make predictions, and so much more. We can also guarantee at least one reference to Kalamazoo every podcast. So if you haven't already, download, subscribe, and listen to Spartan Speak on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on your podcast app of choice.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. God, this is my fault. Our producer, Andrew Hammond, who we have not mentioned yet, and we probably should, who makes this all possible. It's my fault. Sorry, Andrew, because Evan and I were just having, and Carlos, we're just having a spirited conversation, and we weren't recording. I guess it just goes to show that the amateurs we are. Not you, Evan, but me. But me, mostly. I don't want to loop Carlos into that. But
not me.
Anyway, Evan, so you want to give our listeners a sense of what you were just talking about and where the game's going and why you hate baseball?
I love baseball, and I think that, like we were talking about, it's the innovator aspect of Scott Harris that I think is really fascinating. I think, as we talked about, like, if you can try to figure out what's happening 5 years down the road and where baseball is going to be and what people are going to be trying to do, maybe it's not even 5 years down the road. Maybe it's 1-2 years down the road. I mean, maybe it is 6 months, ahead. Like, any little type of gap that you can create for yourself, I mean, that's going to be a huge deal. Like, that's going to be a game-changing type of philosophy to have. And so, yeah, I think it really impressed, like, Christopher Ilitch. We heard that. Impressed him in the interview. I wholeheartedly believe and somewhat kind of know that, like, Scott Harris came into that interview and, like, delivered a plan, explained kind of his vision and what he wants and how he's planning to do these things, because you can talk one way, but then you got to be able to show it. And so I think that if both of them are talking about innovation and what's next and trying to, get that edge, I think there's definitely been plenty of internal conversations about how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that Ilitch mentioned. I mean, that when he was asked, well, what impressed you about Harris? And he said, innovation. I don't know if he really explained too much about what that was. It's probably getting a little bit too much into strategy. You don't want to give away everything, all your secrets, but that's let's just be honest. That's asking a lot. This game's 150 years old or whatever, like, to say, I'm going to see where this is going next. And even there is an opportunity, as Shawn said, with all the little changes that they're doing, to make the game more interesting or, dynamic or whatever it is. It's still hard to predict the future and get there before anybody and to do it well. I mean, that can be tough. So, let's not forget, right? What are the Oakland A's? The Oakland A's were one of the first. They were probably the first Moneyball team, and they learned how to make use of their roster without having a huge payroll and whatever, but they've never won the World Series. I don't even know if they've gotten to the ALCS under Billy Beane. So when he was the GM, but so you can get there first sometimes, but it doesn't mean you're going to be the most successful at it. So it'll be cool to see if he does do some innovating, something that is forward thinking that the Tigers haven't done before. Let's hope that it is actually successful too on the way, and that the Yankees don't just steal this and just replicate it and do it better. And Aaron Judge hits 200 home runs.
What's interesting about it, this, if you guys want to hear this, maybe you don't because whatever. But here's my theory about how baseball works and why it's a little bit different from our other major professional sports. And I think it's, first of all, it's just the nature of the game, but beyond that, it's this lack of a sour cap, right? So baseball teams, you mentioned Oakland, Carlos. You can think of Tampa as a good example right now. Baseball's innovative teams that have figured out ways to win differently a little bit. They do it because of they have to, right? Because they don't have as much money as New York or the Giants or the Cubs or whatever. So they've been forced to do it. Baseball doesn't generally change with transcendent talent, right? You don't have a player. I'm trying to think of an example where a baseball player came in and changed the way baseball was played or changed the way you built a team. I don't know that is maybe Babe Ruth, back when it was maybe in its infancy a little bit. But if you think about the other sports, a particular quarterback, for example, like Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback that comes along that can do all sorts of different things that only quarterbacks used to be good at one thing or the other thing. Or basketball, where somebody comes along, you build a whole team around him. He plays basketball in a different way. And then you build a team around that, and then everybody else wants to look for that next player. Baseball, though, right? It doesn't change that way. It changes because people are forced because of the financial inequities in the sport. And I thought about this with Scott Harris yesterday when he was talking about getting ahead of the game, Evan. What does that mean exactly? What ways can he be creative? I mean, the Tigers can spend. They're not the Yankees. They're not Tampa either. But what ways can he get creative to come up with maybe a new way? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I know we're not going to bunt with a sacrifice bunt anymore. But how about just a regular bunt like what Altuve is doing in Houston this summer? So I'm curious what you think about what those possibilities are.
I think we have lost Evan for the moment, Shawn. I think he's got an emergency assignment call. But
well, how about you? But you and I were talking about this over the break. What do you think? I mean, what do you think about that theory, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of room actually in baseball to do things differently, and I don't understand why. The one thing that bothers me about baseball, and I love it, and I don't mind that it's a defensive game. I don't mind that it takes time. I'm not like you. I have a longer attention span. I can appreciate the nuance of defense and
you're an authoritarian. You're an authoritarian. You like two people involved. You don't want anybody else to get a chance.
Yeah. Go read George Will's book, Men at Work, and you'll appreciate.
If you're gonna quote George Will, how about what Kevin Costner? How about what Crash Davis said? You know what? Strikeouts are fascist. You know what I mean?
And he also said this game's fun.
But spread the ball around. Let everybody else be involved.
Pull the ball like an egg.
Hit the ball. Exactly. But hit the ball. Spread it around.
No, so what bothers me is that like what do you see even right now in Major League Baseball? It's not until the game is in the very late innings and they need to manufacture a run, then finally they play situational ball. They manufacture. They bunt. They do something. It's like, and asking a star player to bunt is like the greatest insult you could ever. Like
it also goes against math, right, Carlos?
What goes against math? No, it doesn't, because when you have the shift, guess what? If you learn how to bunt, you could beat the shift every time. That's how you beat the stupid shift, instead of having baseball have to like create a whole new set of rules for it. Hit it where they ain't. It's how long has that been a rule, right? I mean, no. We got to do it this way.
What's wrong with that?
I got to hit it this way.
Oh, okay, fine. Then let's get rid of offsides in hockey.
What are you talking about? No. I'm talking about with the game, all you have to do is play a little bit differently. That's it, and just it's as simple as that. It's like, no, I'm only a pull hitter. That's the only way I'm going to be able to hit it. I'm not going to change anything about how I, and you've seen little hints about this. And I think it's the Astros who actually do a pretty good job at this, as they work at, hey, even though I'm losing all my power, if I kind of delay my swing a little bit, hit the other way, I can beat the shift a little bit. But you're right, Shawn. I mean, that's just an example of there are places in the game to do things and think about things differently and do them differently. And all that matters is, winning, whether that's pitching, whether that's offense, whatever. If there's things you can do, little looking on the, and this is a place for the Tigers on the margins, little differences on the margins, people will fall in line. If that's successful, people will fall in line and do that.
No, for sure. You're right. There are lots of ways to adjust. When we were young, this is another good example, I think. Maybe I shouldn't say it's a good example. That's probably up to you to decide how arrogant of me. I'm sorry. Here's another example. How about that? When we were younger or young, I don't know, whatever. One of the great storylines in baseball would be when a power pitcher got hurt or just simply aged. I mean, forget Nolan Ryan, but a power pitcher started to lose velocity. And it would force them to figure out how to pick around the margins of the zone,
right,
and change speeds in a different way and move the ball in a different way. And, try to outfox the hitter. You think this is coming. No, I'm going to come with this. And there were lots of examples of that. And the Tigers had a great example in Frank Tanana, but there were examples of that. That's to your point, right? Figuring out new ways,
yes,
to make winning things happen in the game. And,
right.
And the Tigers had just not done any of that. They were blessed with tremendous natural talent during that run, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
I mean, they had one of the best pitchers. Justin Verlander is going to go down as one of the best pitchers ever, right? And Miguel Cabrera too. I mean, and those
were the only
two.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah, we're talking about they were relative to their era. Yeah, they had how many? I mean, they had a lot of studs for sure.
And I remember in the Moneyball movie when they talked about this, and it's like your goal shouldn't be to buy great players; it should be to buy runs, And that's what it came down to for them, and that's probably where a lot of the analytics tell them. But part of it is just an old school thinking for baseball. It's just like, hey, great players, and right now all anybody's going to talk about is Aaron Judge's 60 home runs, and I think there's just this draw, this magnetism to just have great players because they're exciting, they're marketable, having guys who hit the other way or have just they know how to work a pitch count and get on base, that's not as exciting. So that's the question, is where can you, and so a team like the Dodgers is a good example, is they do have a good blend of guys who aren't superstars necessarily, but they play well within that system. They get on base, they manufacture runs, they do what they need to do. The Max Muncies and the Chris Taylors and, even the Justin Turners. Justin Turner was a guy who was left for dead with the Mets, and he came to the Dodgers and he just skyrocketed. So there's that is the idea that, you need to get players who will work within your system, not just, but it's hard to not reach back and the JV era, the Cabrera era, the Scherzer era, the whatever, people want those superstars on their team. So I don't know, can Scott Harris change that? Can he change that thinking, and that we're not going to have to go get Carlos Correa? We're going to find a way to make Javier Baez work within our system and be successful. And
that's really the point. Can they get a little bit more out of some of these guys? The examples, you were talking about him earlier. All of a sudden, why have I forgotten his name? He went to Atlanta. This is ridiculous.
Grossman.
Yeah. The example of Robbie Grossman is an interesting one, and he did do well. He talked about some of their folks in their analytics department, right? Noticed a couple of things.
Yeah,
but then it didn't stick.
And it's a small sample size, though.
No, it is, and maybe it will stick down the road. But that's the thing. I mean, analytics are obviously important, but they're just more tools to figure out whether somebody has hand-eye coordination, right?
Well,
that's really what we're talking about. And
Paredes the same thing in Tampa.
Yeah, exactly. He fell off too, by the way, right? I mean,
but it's also a small sample size. Yeah.
All those homers and sometimes too. I mean, to Hinch's point, I remember, and we don't need to rehash all that. Hinch made the point that sometimes you get a guy in a different system, and there's the expectation of winning, which is completely different, especially in Atlanta. Well, Tampa too, and that can psychologically change too. And we don't talk a lot about that either in this game. Harris mentioned that a couple of times yesterday, right? Just the way, the feeling he wants, the kind of I don't know if he said put out a team. Did he say put out that he wants to put out a team that City can be proud of? I mean, a lot of general managers say that.
He also said it's the city's team. I don't know. It's your team. You're the baseball president.
Well, I mean, he's right though. There's no team if the city doesn't care, right? So that's actually the most fundamental thing in sports, right? If there are no fans, there are no teams. So it's not that complicated. But no, we'll see. I don't know. By the way, I don't know that we're going to get Evan back for to wrap.
I don't think so.
This baseball segment up here. But do you have any last thoughts before we take one more break and get to the Lions on what's going on?
No, I'm just looking forward to really interesting and crazy. And unfortunately, I didn't get to tell Evan. He's probably a little bummed that he probably thought, oh, the GM search is over. Like, nope, you got your president of baseball. Now you got to go fire a GM, and that's a whole new coaching or GM search and more work for him.
If I really did want to channel you, by the way, I would say, why do we need a GM too? Why can't we just say GM? Why do we have to say baseball president of operations or president of baseball operations? Sorry. Why? Why do we have to do that? That's channeling Carlos right there, right?
No. I mean, we were talking about this. I don't know if it was on camera. No, it was before you got there, actually. Evan and I were talking about how many baseball presidents are there, and obviously all these questions about, this was kind of, to me, it was silly. People kept asking in the press conference, like, oh, you grew up in San Francisco and you're at the Giants, and why would you come? Well, for two reasons: money and a bigger title. He's the top of the chain. He was not at the top of the chain in San Francisco. So of course he would have gone anywhere not anywhere, but I think the Mets tried to lure him, but yeah, you get a bigger title, more money. Of course you're going to go, you're in charge. So, and he talked about that these jobs are becoming more complex, with all the analytics and data and everything. So as Evan was saying, he just probably wants a lot more, as many smart minds in the room as you can get. So it makes sense that he splits up the job a little bit.
Yep. All the data. It's not just, I mean, we shouldn't say data, all the analytics, the numbers, but there's also a lot of data from video, right? And recording, the way you break down things, the way you think about things. So it's not just the numbers that study what happens after the game and all that's compiled, or what's happened, whatever level that game is at. It's also in camps and or breaking down swings, breaking down pitching, and all that, and using technology for all of that too. That's relatively new, right? I mean, within the last 10 years.
That's new, and I also just wonder, because he was the general manager with the Giants, just how much of it is like now he can be kind of the 40,000 foot view here and be the overseer of the entire organization, not have to mess with as much of the day to day and the movement of players and the transactional things. He can leave that more to the general manager and not have to busy himself with that, making phone calls necessarily. I mean, he can essentially be the general manager making those decisions, but doesn't have to transact them. So that probably frees him up with a little, with more time to think about other things, innovating and different things that the general manager doesn't have to concern himself with.
Right. And before we get, I just want to say this one last thing before we get too wrapped up in the idea of innovation and creativity. And obviously you need both. It's also just fundamentally, they need to improve some things within that organization in terms of the way they evaluate, right? Scott Harris talked a lot about development, but also evaluate, right? And where they're going to do it and the expanse of that. I mean, I know hardcore Tigers fans, maybe even casual Tigers fans, have noted for a while, where the international players coming from. You're talking about the GM, the Scott Harris is making the comment that his job's more complicated now, or it gets more complex rather, as time goes on. And you mentioned part of it's the data, but part of it's also where you're getting players from and the scope of that. It's really, really wide. And the Tigers need to. What's the right way to say this, Carlos? Beef up, redouble. They need to improve in these areas, don't they? Right. And I would bet Harris is going to spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. What do you think?
Yeah, scouting's huge, and evaluating talent, the right kind of talent, and that's where you need that organizational vision of these are the kind of players we want. Do we want a Spencer Torkelson, or do we want, and he's an extreme example, or do we want more of a gritty Javier Baez? Do we want whoever, do we want Victor Reyes? Do we want, all that stuff? They have to decide the kind of players they want. And then be accurate, be accurate in their scouting. So it's a huge undertaking to have that focus and then implement it.
No, absolutely. Everybody wants a Miguel Cabrera, right? But there are a lot of ways to find.
You want to right now? I don't think anybody wants him.
Yeah, no, right. But yeah, exactly. But there are a lot of other kind of players that can be winning players, as baseball shows every year, except for your Dodgers, who have spent a lot of money, kind of like the Yankees, right? So,
well, the Dodgers are a good example when they had Yasiel Puig. Right when he joined the Dodgers, it was like, do you really want this player? And he was exciting. He was a thrill a minute, but he didn't work. Eventually they decided he's just not working with our organization. He's not the guy that we need, that fits our mold, our focus, and they got rid of him. And it was unpopular with the fans because he was a fun player. But when he's tearing up, lineup or, position cards in the outfield and he's not getting along with his coaches and whatever, it's like, it's time to go. And they won a World Series without him.
They did. Speaking of time to go, we need to take one more quick break, Carlos.
Oh, nice segue.
Okay, thank you. We will be right back to talk about Carlos's Detroit Lions, who are going to win the Super Bowl this year. But we need to pay some bills first. Join us in what, Carlos?
I don't know, 30 seconds.
30 seconds, 60 seconds, something like that. It won't be too long. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, I think it's time. We've waited long enough. Enough with the baseball stuff. The season's wrapping down. You know what I mean?
I gotta apologize though. I was informed that I used a potty mouth word, and executive producer Anjanette Delgado will be none too happy. So our producer Andrew Hammond now has to go bleep it. But this is not my fault, Shawn, because yesterday I was a guest on the ML Soul of Detroit podcast with you and Mike Elrick and Mark Fallhauer. And I was explaining to Andrew that it's like when you go to the bad kid's house and there's a lot of swearing and stuff, and then you come back and the kid has this potty mouth. That's what happened to me. I was infected by your crass behavior and coarse language. So I apologize to Anjanette and all our listeners. It won't happen again.
Really? So how do I make the switch?
I don't know. No, you drop some words here and there, but you don't even care. You don't apologize to anybody. It just gets bleeped out.
Yeah, not over there. It doesn't, right?
No holds barred. It's like Animal House over there.
Yeah. What word did you use?
It abbreviation is GD.
Oh,
I was quoting Bull Durham.
Oh, if you were you know what? We had, what did I see in the paper the other day? What did I see in the paper? I was surprised.
Careful. Don't say it.
No. I saw it in the paper in somebody's story. It was off the Lions game.
It was Briquette. He used a word for excrement.
Yeah.
Because he's Briquette. He can do whatever he wants.
No. Amon-Ra St. Brown said he was running on the jet sweep and he noticed, this is a good way to get into the Lions, and he noticed that the Washington defense wasn't really ready for it. And he described their reaction as like, oh,
great. Now we're bleeping again.
No, we're not, Anjanette, because it is in the Monday paper. I saw it.
Do you not understand there are different rules? Briquette has different rules. You have different rules. I have different rules. It's like the Jordan rules. Like Briquette can do whatever he wants. He has a no edit policy. Nobody changes anything he does. So we're quoting the Lions.
Yeah,
they say a lot of stuff that we don't quote. So.
Fun young receiver, and I was surprised to see it in there. Like, oh wow, we're actually kind of.
Anjanette's probably going to go read that now and like call Briquette and like, don't you ever do this again? Don't.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I used it, and maybe I did, and I probably put expletive in there. You know what I mean?
I don't even try. I've given up.
Yeah, I don't want to get on the talking about the Athletic and so forth, but they will. Their site, other competitors out there that I guess we should not name, but what the heck? Everybody knows we compete against them. But you see language in a lot of these sites, right? And sometimes I think, oh yeah, they're just being a little. They want to be cool, right? They want to be hip.
I think when you have to, in that case, I'd have no problem with it with St. Brown saying it that way because it needed to like the way he said it. But when they just drop expletive out of just randomly, there's no point in even using that because it's just an empty word. But when he uses it to illustrate a specific, like, oh my God, these guys were, freaked out or whatever, I think you should use it. And let's just face it, who are we offending on the internet and on page 6 of the Free Press?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, apparently we're offending Anjanette. I don't know. Maybe she would be less offended if she spent a little bit more time worrying about getting hits in softball. By the way, Mookie. Speaking of words, and because I thought you were going down the road of that the cursing is the refuge for lazy minds or whatever. It's also there are also lots of thoughts that if you don't curse, then you're just kind of repressed and not being who you are, so you're not really yourself. So who knows? I don't know. I'm not going to make any kind of sweeping judgment. I am going to say though that for a wordsmith like yourself, you used a word in your Tigers column that was a little. It had a few syllables. And the word escapes me all of a sudden. This is terrible.
It's a great word, but you can't remember what it was.
Okay. I'm not necessarily saying it was a great word. It's the kind of word that you would give me crap for. And Sequious. I thought, was that it?
No.
God, what word did you use? You should know. Come on.
I don't know. I use a lot of words.
And why isn't Andrew supposed to be hey guys, I'm not just a producer. I'm a researcher. Oh yeah. Well, where's the word?
Is he stat boy now? Is he stat boy on?
Yeah.
TMI. What's it called?
I don't know that we want to call him boy, but yeah, he's a man, right?
Tony, what was it? Rioli or something?
He's a man. Who said was that? Will Ferrell? Listen to us. Now we're dating ourselves an anchor man. I'm a man. I'm a man who built the Eiffel Tower. That's the kind of man Andrew is, right? Is that what we're saying?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, what the heck were we talking about? Oh, the Lions. We were talking about the Lions before we got distracted by talking about poop.
Yes.
So they won, man, and you wrote a positive column. I wrote
not as positive as yours.
No, mine wasn't. Mine was actually not as positive as yours. I wrote about the fun people are having out there right now. And you wrote about how you personally believe in it. Yes. I just wrote, wow, these people are having a lot of fun. And when's the last time you could say that? And I think you're right. They are fun. I don't know how good they are, but they're fun. And how long is that going to last, right? You actually went further and said, Carlos Monarez, believe in them.
Yes. And I did it because, so this is an example of everybody, when people like certain other Free Press columnists named Shawn Windsor give me crap about this. Oh, crap. Great. Sorry about that, Andrew and Anjanette. When they give me a guff about this,
about what? Being positive?
When I criticize,
I believe.
When I criticize people and like, oh, you're just negative, and you criticize people, and you're just always a contrarian. No, I said this was a must-win game last week. I wrote it. I said they have to win. They have to beat the Commanders because this is a winnable game, and it's important to back up all this talk about doing things the right way and not quitting and having grit and blah blah blah. And they did it. So if they had lost, I would have given them guff about it, but they won. So I decided hey man, it goes both ways. And I'm going to write a positive column saying they did what they needed to do in that game. It was impressive and they deserve full credit for that. And I don't know when they're going to win again necessarily, but they deserve credit for that. So I wanted to be, I tried, believe it or not, I try to be fair, Shawn. And this is an example of being fair to the Lions about that.
I love how you pat yourself on the back. And by the way, this is a trend I've noticed because our other colleague who's a sports columnist, his name is, we don't need to know. Oh, what the heck? Jeff Seidel wrote a column. I was going to
say Mitch Albom.
Yeah. There's Mitch too. Everybody's a columnist. Now
that I'm a columnist, anybody can do it. Okay.
Well, I see Chris Solari and Dave Burkett, their photos.
They're insiders.
Yeah, everybody. Columnists. We're really all columnists at this point. It's what people want. They want to know what you think.
You just watered down my title. Thank you.
No, I didn't. To a point. Jeff wrote a piece about the Tigers, and that headline was, "Here's why I believe in Scott Harris," or something like that. Here's what I believe. And I was like, oh my goodness, Carlos is rubbing off on everybody else. What the heck is going on, Carlos?
There are people. I'm influential, Shawn. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, also, and then as I told you, my favorite part was when I was kind of jousting with Campbell a little bit at the press conference, and he said my name, and like you were like, don't do it, don't don't quote yourself as being like, named, and like, oh, I have to do it. And I got an email about it where someone like totally made fun of me. It was just the highlight of my day. It was so fun to do that. Mostly because I knew it bothered you.
No, it didn't bother me. What does bother me is that you would describe that playful interchange as jousting. This makes me question now your view of the world.
It was playful jousting. It was
really? Okay.
Low key. It was just a fun. And by the way, to the listener,
so not to the
there,
death, not to the death.
No. It wasn't The Last Duel, which is actually a really good movie, by the way.
It was more like Heath Ledger's jousting movie, whatever that was.
Yeah. What was that called?
Yeah, I can't remember. It was like a medieval movie with Led Zeppelin songs or something. I don't know. Or Queen, maybe. I can't remember.
The last night. Anyway, and so just to be clear, coaches refer to us by our first names all the time. It's not anything unique or whatever, but I just threw it in there. I threw it in there for two reasons. I think it made the quote more fun, actually, because I set it up saying, like I was kind of arguing with him a little bit about this point that he wasn't giving Hutchinson enough credit. And so he specifically addressed me saying, no, I am giving him credit, Carlos, whatever, like I love it and blah, blah, blah. So I think it just added a little more context to the quote.
Tell yourself whatever you need to tell yourself. That's cool.
Any validation, man. I'm insecure. Yeah. What do you want?
Well, I think most people in this business are, right?
You know what? And that's the thing. We also talked to Iserman today about his pre
today. What's
the other
day?
This week at some point, some indeterminate time on the spectrum of time or whatever. And he's actually really good about, because it was on Zoom, so he can see everybody's name. So he's really good about saying, well, if you ever asked a question, Shawn, he would actually say, well, Shawn, I disagree with your point entirely, but here's my answer. So why don't you ask questions? You never ask questions in press conferences. Why?
I often ask questions. It just depends,
Never, unless it's Izzo.
No, that's not true. I ask questions all the time. I wasn't writing off the wings press conference, and I was just sort of listening. Huh. And with Harris yesterday, the questions I wanted to ask got asked. So sometimes that happens.
It is a tricky balance. Sometimes you have a question and someone asks it, and like, oh, okay, I'm not going to put my hand up in the air now, or I got to take and even today on the Zoom, someone said, oh, that question was already, you're in a queue. It was answered. I don't need that question anymore.
I like answering. I like asking questions in smaller groups. I do ask them at games, at the end of games at times, but sometimes I don't want to ask a question because it's proprietary, right? And as a columnist, you have a lot of freedom to write what you think and your opinions. And sometimes if you ask a question about something that's in your head, you're kind of putting another idea out there. And I've just always been a little bit leery of that. And I think part of it too is like, what's that?
That's right. Absolutely right. You don't want to give away what you're focusing on or what you're going to.
Yeah. And, and you could say, well, okay, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And you don't worry about it. And that's true. And a lot of times I don't, but there are times when there's something I'm thinking about and I'm fairly certain it's going to be my own kind of take. Not that it's any great take, but it's just maybe a little bit different in some way. That's all. Not better, not worse, nothing, just a little different. And I don't want to get it out there. So that, if it's a gay, it just really depends, especially with stuff like yesterday. Like I knew what I was going to write off of Harris yesterday. I would probably be the only one writing it. Now, again, not that makes it special or anything. It doesn't. It's just different. And we're paid in part, right, Carlos, to have something that's a take or an opinion or some insight or analysis that's your own thing. What do you think?
I'm not paid at all. This is all purely work release program for me. So I don't know.
Well, you look good. You lost a lot of weight when you were locked up. So you look good. Yeah.
It has its benefits. It has its benefits.
You tossed the iron around, didn't you?
Yes. The leg irons. This is too insider baseball. People like to hear about this sometimes with the media, but it's a tricky thing of you don't want to give away what you're going to focus on or write about. But there's a lot of it. And I respect the people who don't ask questions sometimes, because if you don't have a completely unique question, so you're just taking up time, and you only have so much time to ask questions in a press conference. And some people just cannot stop asking questions, and they're very mundane questions. And it's like, bro, are you really going to write about this? Is this just a fourth item in your notebook that you got to ask about some back of the end of the roster guy? And you're taking away the chance for somebody else to ask a more meaningful question when there's bigger questions at stake or bigger issues at stake. So that's where it gets selfish, that some people just love to just ask a bunch of boom, boom, boom questions. And I also don't like, I hope people would believe this, but I do ask some hard questions. I don't like to just throw some softballs up there and how excited were you about this guy playing, whatever. I can ask hard questions. I don't like the people steal those answers, because they can sometimes be uncomfortable questions and people don't want to ask them. But when I ask them and people answer, the coach or whoever it is answers them, people are very happy to write about it and use that answer, but they're never going to ask that question themselves because they're a little afraid of the blowback, So that's where I struggle with, like, is someone really not going to ask this question about a guy getting in trouble or a problem with the coach getting fired or whatever it is? I guess I'll ask it, and guess everybody else writes about it, So it's sometimes you got to just take it,
I tend to ask questions when I tend to ask questions after games, for one. The other time I like to ask questions is when I'm going specifically because I want to write about something and I want to ask somebody. Like, I've done that a couple times with the Lions in the last few weeks, where I've gone down there specifically to ask one question, and I wasn't really concerned with anything else in the press conference, right? And so that's when I tend to ask questions also. It's not that I'm trying to get a specific answer. I don't want to lead anybody anywhere, any coach or athlete or general manager anywhere, but it's just, I have a thought about something and I want to know what they think about it, right? So
yes, and that's the time to ask. And I don't want to out people in the media, but there are some people who just ask questions like, are you going to use this answer at all? This is just it seems like sometimes it's just a random thought that pops into somebody. I'm just curious about this, in general, like, you're taking up time. We only have, especially with the Lions cut off interviews real quick. 2 more questions, like after, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever. So the window is very small.
It is small. Like, I tend to ask more questions on Lions games on the road because the group's a lot smaller. Right?
It's a lot smaller.
And I don't worry about losing, any kind of I should say proprietary. That makes it sound like it's more important than it is. It's not. This is all just silly business, and we're trying to, hope a few people read and have a diversion, in the day or whatever. But yeah, my silliest questions, Carlos, and I can't believe we got on this topic, but my silliest questions, my dumbest questions, my most ridiculous questions are definitely when I'm around basketball, because I get too excited about particular plays or strategy or whatever. And, I got called out on it a little bit an NCAA tournament last year when I did that.
Because you're not going to write about it.
No, actually I did. I always do it. In fact, what I'd ask about, I was writing about, I want to say Max Christie, and I wrote about him, and of course I used it. I always do. But,
you were flexing.
No. I just get excited. I do it with Juwan. I definitely do it with Dwayne Casey. I used to love to do that with John Beeline, because he loved talking about that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can get a little bit too carried away, right?
Yeah,
in that way. So I've had.
I think that's it, when you're off to the side and whatever. That's the time to ask those kind of things. Like, just, I'm curious in a point of basketball. Yep. Why do you do this or whatever? And that's instructive too. And we always do that. There's times where we can do that. But when you're in a tight crunch and the window is small, sucking up time to talk about some insidery thing, it's like, bro, we gotta move it. You're cutting someone else's question off by doing that.
Did you say bro, or did you mean to say brosif?
Broski.
God, I haven't heard broski in a while either. Okay, let's we probably ought to wrap this up. This was a nice Lions segment, by the way. We're going a little bit long, but let's wrap this Lions before we get to my favorite thing. Let's wrap this Lions.
Oh my God, are you having a stroke?
Yeah, let's wrap this Lions thing up real quick with this. Have you take out the question about how good they are or how good they'll be this year, and whether they're going to have a 5-win team or an 8-win team, whatever, 9-win. set that aside for a second. When was the last time you saw the fan base? And, I know not everybody, but a big chunk of the fan base feel this much joy. I don't know how. I just want to keep it simple. Just joy with this team, because I don't remember it. I know it's happened before, but I was trying to think of the last time I heard this. What I heard Monday morning is out and about in life, and you probably heard too. I don't remember the last time I heard that. What about you? And why? And tell me why is this different? Because they're 1-1 and they could easily be a 5-win team.
It's different because of Hard Knocks and all the offseason hype and getting the new coordinator and, adding Jameson Williams. There's things that they've done this offseason that made it seem as though, and it's like this a lot, but this season, a lot of things, Hard Knocks is different, but the hype was there. They got a lot more attention than they normally do in most off seasons, nationally, locally. I don't know if you could tell, but going out to practice and training camp, I know Burkett would say that we never went out there, but when you go out there seem to be more people charged up, more media there more often, I think. And part of that's just, when you're on a television show, and there's all these cameras around, whatever, I don't know, people just get excited. But yeah, they're making good on, it's the offense mostly, right? They're scoring a ton of points. They're having good production, even though they lost the first game. It's I think they always hope that this team is turning the corner, and there's a glimmer of hope that could be true. And through the first two games at home, now they're going to go on the road, so it's going to be different. But yeah, it's been a long time, Shawn. I can't even remember the last time that there was this much early season hope. And this is the second year of Campbell's tenure, right? It's like he's the first new coach. It's his first year. Let's see what he's about. We had a whole year to see what he's about. So it's actually kind of interesting that way.
It is. And I guess I'd wrap this segment about the client Lions. And for those of you out there listening, I'm putting the word Lions in air quotes. I learned that trick from Carlos, by the way. I think, yeah, I understand the Hard Knocks. I get it. The draft, all of that. I think it just comes down to the fact that last Sunday against Washington, their offense, when the game got tight, put together a couple of drives that did not look familiar. Right? We saw Stafford occasionally win a game late. Yeah. And a comeback. He led the league. He was near he did that a lot. Yeah. What we didn't see were early fourth quarter drives and late third quarter drives to maintain control of the game. We didn't see that very often. And the way they did it, and Swift catching a pass, falling down on his butt, getting back up and scooting, what St. Brown did, the idea that Williams is coming, but they're fun, they're kind of fun to watch. Offense is always more fun to watch for most people, right?
Yeah.
I think that's just part of it, right? They're kind of fun to watch. And they're like, hey, they might not be too bad offensively. And then I think it's even more fun that when they watch Monday night, Philly take it to Minnesota, thinking, okay, Philly's not so bad. So
Philly's good. Yeah.
I don't know how good, but in any case, all right, man, we got a lot of Lions stuff to talk about as the season goes on.
Yeah.
Who knows? It'll be a very different conversation. Could be a very different conversation next week. All right, let's get to the favorite things real quick and then get out of here and let the listeners get back to their lives.
All right, Shawn, my favorite thing, one of my favorite things in a long time is I grew up a Steve Garvey fan in Los Angeles.
Oh my God, Carlos. More Dodgers.
And I was a young kid, and Garvey, he was a lot of people's favorite player. And this is all before everything else happened, right? But he'd be on the post-game show and an interview, and he'd say hi to his wife and kids, and go to bed, kids. I'll see you tomorrow. He just seemed like the word cleaver, basically, right? Playing first base for the Dodgers. Number 6, he wore number 6. It was the hardest number to always get. I just loved him. He was my first sports hero, my favorite player for a long time. And by the way, number 6 is still my favorite number. So I always wanted to play first base growing up, playing Little League and all that. But I was not tall. So I never really got to play first base. So I played like third and second and outfield, whatever. Well, this year, Shawn, on our free softball team that you haven't come to support in person, I've moved over to first base a little bit more. Mike Elrick plays there a little bit. Jim Schaefer plays there. But I've found a little home there. I've been, pretty good at picking the ball. And so because of that, I've decided, and my softball glove's more of an infielder's glove. I decided I had to go to Dick's Sporting Goods and buy a first baseman's glove. And Shawn, I can't tell you how long I've waited to have the excuse to buy a first baseman's glove. As you know, it's a little bit different. It's rounded. It's got a little deeper pocket. And so little Carlos's dream of playing first base and trying to become Steve Garvey, and by the way, Garvey was not tall. He was like 5'10", 5'11", or whatever. If you obviously moved to Michigan State, he's an incredible baseball and football player there. And it's coming close to coming true, Shawn. I'm going to finally be the first baseman in the mold of Steve Garvey that I always knew I could be. So that was my favorite thing, having my first baseman's glove finally after many, many decades that I've been waiting to own that thing.
Steve Harvey, by the way, whose forearms were wider than he was tall, right? Yeah. Yeah, I know. God, I liked Ron Say. Wasn't he on those teams too?
Penguin? Yeah, I saw Ron Say when his kid was playing at Cal. I went to a baseball game there one time, and Ron Say was over there. He was a few bleachers away, and they don't get a bunch of fans. So it was probably like maybe a couple hundred fans in the stands. I was like, should I go say hi to the Penguin? But I was always I don't like to approach people that I admired and whatever, because if they're jerks, it'll just kill me that they're just going to be jerks, and that, don't meet your heroes. Everybody always says that, right? So is that why
you never say hi to me out in the world when I'm doing the podcast?
You said to call you Mr. Windsor and don't make eye contact. So that's why
because you don't want to find out that I'm a jerk.
Davey Lopes came to my elementary school one time, actually.
Really? My favorite player when I was this is probably a little bit after Garvey and Say. I don't remember if they overlapped it, but I loved watching Kirby Puckett play.
Oh yeah, he was small. He was smaller than Garvey and wider, but he was great.
John Kruk. What happened to the misshapen, but different shaping baseball player? How about that?
Analytics. Can't have fat guys anymore. Fat short guys are out.
Yeah, even if you can hit.
Yeah, nobody cares. Yeah, Babe Ruth wouldn't have cut it. He'd be with the Mud Hens right now or something.
No, nobody cut it.
Syracuse Clippers. So who was your first? This is getting off topic, but your first sports hero, who did you look to the most as young Shawn?
Oh,
you shouldn't have to think about this.
Because there was a tie. There were a few players that I loved. I loved Elvin Hayes, because I lived in DC in the mid '70s when the back then they were known as the Bullets, when the Washington Bullets, the NBA team, when they were really good.
Names of the DC teams, man.
Yeah, I know, right? And he was the center, and I really enjoyed watching him. My favorite football player in those days, and it carried over because I don't know why, maybe because I was a military brat and I moved around and I didn't really have a team from any particular area, so I just kind of adopted teams randomly. I know some kids still do that, but my kids grew up Colts fans, and one was a Colts fan, the other was a Chargers fan because of Dalian Tomlinson, and the other one was a Colts fan because of Peyton Manning, because the Lions were so bad there. That was the 0-16. Remember all that?
Yeah.
How could you forget that?
Who's yours?
Anyway, Tony Dorsett, probably.
Oh, yeah.
I loved watching him run at Pitt, and then I just followed him to the Cowboys, and I already kind of liked the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I think I was living in Germany. No, maybe I was still in DC when Dorsett came along, but
sweet.
Yeah, and I just loved all those guys. Who else did they have? Drew Pearson.
Yeah.
Staubach. But I loved watching Dorsett run, the way he accelerated, how smooth he glided.
Yeah.
So
I was an Earl Campbell guy, but yeah. I know you like the finesse and the parabolas.
No, I liked Earl Campbell too, but Houston was a rival, and I liked the Cowboys. And I like Campbell too, but yeah.
They were friends. They were really good friends, by the way.
Yeah, and neither one of them in today's game. It's just right. I remember talking to Courtney Hawkins. Have we talked about this on this podcast before?
No. Mm-mm.
Courtney Hawkins, who was a All-American receiver at Michigan State in the late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember. Had a 8-9 year career in the league. Good player. Coached at Flint Beecher. He's now the wide receivers coach at Michigan State. Anyway, I remember talking to him one time when he was coaching at Beecher. I was doing a long piece on him and all the good work he was doing up in his high school alma mater. And somehow Earl Campbell came up and he's like, yeah, he was my favorite player when I was young, but he couldn't play in today's league because, you know,
He did one thing.
he ran over people. And the people that he was running over back then were 215 pounds,
Right.
running 4.7 40s. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, right? But it's not like the argument about Michael Jordan playing against plumbers, but it's the similar idea.
Well,
So,
but that was what the league was. I mean, a lot of people, if he was playing now, that wouldn't be his game. He wouldn't be trying to do that. He'd have to do things differently.
yeah, he would, and you'd wonder what that looked like. But no, I always admired Earl Campbell too, just the way he ran over people. But
He looked like Derrick Henry is who he'd look like.
yeah, no, this is my favorite thing. I'm changing my favorite thing. I just in general, but no, my favorite thing is when we get off topic. I was thinking about this earlier in the podcast. Sometimes we get off talking, we never where it's going to go. That's my favorite thing of the week is when we get rolling like this and getting silly. I think I really, really enjoy that. So that's my favorite thing. Plus it's quick. All right. Who do we
Anjan had already cut us off 10 minutes ago. Nobody heard any of that.
I know. Who do we need to? Well, if you were at the ML Soul of Detroit the other day, you realize they go like hours and hours. My God.
It's still going.
Yeah, it is still going. All right. Who do we need to thank, Carlos?
Producer Andrew Hammond. And we'd like to thank co-executive producers Kirkland Crawford and Anjanette Delgado, I think is her name. And of course, the big guy, Peter Bhatia, editor of the Detroit Free Press. And where can you find the show, Shawn?
We can find it. Well, I think we know where to find it, but y'all can find it if you let my southernness come out a little bit here. Y'all can find it at Spotify. You can find it at Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Basically, you can find us. And when you get there, Carlos, what do you want them to do?
You need to subscribe and you need to like and you know what? Leave us a rating. Tell us what you think, good or bad. We'd love the feedback from our one listener.
We do, and we thank you for listening. It used to be our former producer, Todd Davis, his father. Todd. What am I saying?
Oh my God, he's already dead to you.
Yeah, I know. Tad Davis, his father, Todd. Right?
Andrew's going to bleep this out anyway. He's not going to have any
I mix him up. He was for a long time probably our only listener. So we want to thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davis. How about that? I'm just going to call him Mr. Davis. Anyway,
he doesn't listen anymore. Now that his kid's off the show.
All right, let's get the heck out of here. We want to thank you all again for listening, spending time with us. We will be back next week with more silliness and I don't know, revelry, whatever. You know, maybe we'll even pop a beer open. What do you say, Carlos?
No, I don't do that. I don't imbibe that way.
We don't want to do that. Okay. Well,
Anjanette's mad again now. So we're going to get drunk on.
Well, we're not plugging anybody. That's Andrew. He's sitting there saying, "Hey,
when we get a beer sponsorship, it won't matter. Then we'll be fine."
Yeah. No. This is how. Yeah, morals go out the window, don't they? When it comes to that. Yeah. All right, man. It was fun. Good talking, and we will be back here next week.